You know, when I look around at all the entrepreneurs who are grinding it out, spending 70 to 80 hours per week growing their business, you have to ask yourself the question, at what cost? Hi, my name's Tim Uchuk, and in this podcast, we're going to be exploring the tools, tactics, and strategies for crushing it and scaling your business without making the ultimate sacrifice of your time and freedom. Hey guys, Tim Uchuk here, and I'm just on my way to a coffee shop where I like to do my work 1 or 2 days out of the week. I find that mixing up my routine, at least for me, it stimulates my creativity to do things a little bit different, mix it up every once in a while. In fact, when I used to live in Edmonton before we moved out here to the island 3 months ago, I used to mix up my commute to our head office, a couple of days a week. I would just go a different route, even mix up my coffee shops where I would stop for coffee on the way in. I found was good, stimulating for the brain and breaking up that monotony. And actually, yesterday was a good example of spontaneity and it's so good for the soul. I'm feeling so energized and rejuvenated today because yesterday spontaneously I was asking my wife when low tide was, because when the tide goes down here on the island, it reveals really good sand for the kids to hang out on, and all kinds of stuff like starfish and digging for clams and stuff like that. It's a lot of fun. So I asked my wife when low tide was, and it was like 10 to 2 in the afternoon. So I said, let's go to the beach. Let's take the kids and go to the beach, because that's why we moved to the island. We want to be able to do stuff like this and not just wait till the weekend, but be able to, and this is how I define like true freedom, spontaneously pack a bag, take the kids, go to the beach. So that's what we did. Spent like an hour and a half running around, digging up these things called gooey ducks, which are these phallic looking clams, but it's kind of fun to dig them up, because when you try to grab them, they sink into the sand. So it's kind of a fun little exercise. Anyways, that's what we did yesterday. It was amazing. Highly recommend introducing a little bit more spontaneity like that in your life. I call these things mini vacations, when you have a little dose, tiny little vacation, reward yourself, celebrate the journey, because as an entrepreneur, it's often we have a lot of like tough, challenging days, which I enjoy. But if you reward yourself and celebrate the journey along the way, you're telling yourself that it's worth it. So it's a little hack that I like to do, is just spontaneous mini vacations. So in this podcast episode, what I wanted to talk about was actually something that is universal, which is solving problems. And specifically, I wanted to talk about a hack that I have when it comes to solving problems. And the truth of the matter is that the universal challenge, the universal commonality here, is that we're all going to have problems always, forevermore. You solve one, it will reveal another. And hopefully you're knocking down old problems and finding new ones. The worst is the definition of insanity, where you're doing the same thing expecting different results. So hopefully you're knocking down, the game is knocking down problems, finding new ones and solving those at the root level, hopefully, right? Not at the top level, so that they don't come up again. And so here's one of the strategies, and it kind of brought to mind earlier this week during one of our perfect weekly coaching calls with one of my clients who has a rental company that is exploding in California, and they can't hire fast enough, and they just moved into a new building because they were bursting at the seams in the old one. And it's funny because, like, for every entrepreneur, when you face a new problem, it's a problem because you've never dealt with it before, right? And so you're constantly having to innovate and learn new things in order to develop new capabilities to knock down new problems. And so they're facing problems around, hiring, onboarding, communication challenges when it comes to, like, how do we get everybody on the same page? And the problem that came to mind, aside from the communication one, which we chatted about, was how do we set up our new office space? What can we do here? And how would you go about it? What's the framework? And so one of my problem solving frameworks is a Japanese framework, which comes from my experience with someone who led one of the famous Toyota plants in California, which is called the NUMMI plant. just for a little bit of history, which is where Tesla is located in Palo Alto. So the NUMMI plant, prior to being Tesla, where they manufacture the Model S and 3 and X and all that kind of stuff, was notorious for shifting from one of the worst performing plants in a nutshell to one of the best performing plants. When Toyota sent in their snipers, their heavy hitters, to totally revamp their culture. And so I was working alongside one of the guys who led that charge in the NUMMI plant, which is now the Tesla plant, and we were facing a problem, a challenge in our facility where we had more demand for our truck bodies. I've got a truck body manufacturing plant, more demand than we could supply. And we were sitting in a boardroom office talking about this, right? We're talking in circles about, how what are the major hurdles when it comes to building this particular part of the body, the truck body, right? And how can we solve it? We're going back and forth. We're looking at the whiteboard. We're debating all this kind of stuff. And he says, guys, why the hell are we talking about this in a boardroom? And so here's the strategy. It's go to the Gemba. Go to the Gemba. Gemba means where the work happens. Get up off your butt. Go to where it's happening and visualize it. Talk to the people. So here's the problem we were facing was us executives are talking about this in the boardroom, and he said, let's actually go out there, talk to the people, let's walk through it and see what we see. Go to the Gemba where the work happens, because otherwise we're basically delusional. We're pretending that we can solve something, imagining it in our heads. Where why don't we actually go out there, talk to the people who are doing the work, and come up with the solution that way? Which do you think is going to yield a better result, right? So go to the Gemba. So in our conversation this week in our coaching call, it was exactly that. Why don't you walk through chronologically from the start of the journey in your business to the end? So, when people walk in, what happens? What do they see? What's the conversation that takes place? And chronologically go through the entire flow. So they rent porta potties and all kinds of stuff for like construction and sites where they need infrastructure. That's what they rent. And so at some point, the equipment is going to go out. At some point, the equipment's going to come in. So go to the Gemba. Go to where you visualize the trucks leaving. Talk to the drivers and ask them, okay, so when a truck is leaving, what are you doing? Talk me through it. Let's go through it chronologically. And for you to pretend that you can solve this stuff from a boardroom, conceptualizing it versus actually going to where the work happens, actually talking to the people that are doing the stuff that you're planning around, which do you think is going to yield a better result? So whenever you feel like you're stuck solving a problem, and this is a really important one, always involve the stakeholders. And here's another secret, is that if you have a top-down strategy where you're coming up with solutions without involving your stakeholders, which route do you think is going to get greater adoption and buy-in? You creating the solution yourself and handing it down, or you developing a solution with the stakeholders, with your team, having them actually have a slice of that solution by understanding here's the problem we're trying to solve, getting everybody to weigh in and saying, okay, so how does this impact you? What would you like to see? What things are important to you? Involve them, involve your stakeholders. I guarantee you, you're going to 10x your adoption, your buy-in, which, what does that do? It removes the burden of you having to herd the cats, having to force people to buy into something that you came up with in your boardroom versus getting out there and talking to the people, talking to your stakeholders, talking to your team, coming up with a joint solution that everybody owns and can buy into, right? So really, really important distinction. And so just to wrap this up, if you are facing problems or challenges and you're trying to solve them in a vacuum, in isolation, go to the Gemba. Go and talk to the people that are going to be involved in whatever the solution is, whatever you're thinking through. And if it's in a physical environment, or let's say you're documenting a process or a procedure, do it. Do the thing, go through it as if you're simulating it, And if one, let's say you're documenting a procedure, for example, for you to document it without having a concrete example is insane. It's insanity. So again, if you're documenting a process or a procedure, for example, come up with a real one and use that to go through it and involve the stakeholders that are actually going to be doing the thing, right? And another, speaking of processes, procedures, and then I'll wrap this up. Um, the goal of when you're documenting a process or a procedure, and when you get questions around this kind of stuff as well, because this is a very common problem and challenge, is to say like, why are we doing this stuff? Well, the goal is, and what are we going for? What level of quality and standard are we going for here? Well, pretend that you can't talk to someone and they need to go through the documentation. And we use a lot of video and stuff like that to make it really easy. Video's worth a million words, right? Picture's worth 1,000 words. The goal, the standard, is that for someone to go through it without being able to ask you anything or talk to you, to be able to run through a task or a procedure. That's the goal. That's what we're going for here. Why is this important? Which context is everything when you're involving your stakeholders, they need to understand the why, right? What's the overall, what's in it for me? Why are we putting energy and effort into this thing? And it's the old hit by a bus, if there's a vacation. Also, if there's more than one person working on something, um, and it's not documented in a certain way, what do you think is going to happen? Your standards are going to go down the toilet, and people are just going to do it the way they see fit. And unfortunately, we're creatures of habits, and we like to do things, sometimes take the easy route, sometimes take shortcuts, sometimes take the path of least friction, which when it comes to standards in your company isn't always the way to go, right? So giving people context, involving them, and go to the Gemba. So the common theme here in everything is um, to avoid solving problems in a fictional environment. Actually go out there, see the place with your own eyes, talk to the people, talk to the stakeholders, and I guarantee you're going to have much, much greater results. So I hope that's helpful, guys. I am now at the coffee shop. I'm going to go out and grind today. Hope you guys have an awesome rest of your week. Hope that was useful, and I will talk to you soon.
Hey, Tim Uchuk here, and real quick, if you enjoyed this podcast episode, if you could take a couple quick seconds to give it a rating, it would be very much appreciated. And secondly, if you're looking for more tools and strategies on how you can crush it in life and business, just head on over to bookwithtim.com, where I've put together a free case study which shows you how to unlock unprecedented freedom today by using the 2 power levers. Just head on over to bookwithtim.com. Until next time, wishing you success and freedom in your business. Cheers.
The podcast you just heard was made using Anchor. Ever thought about making your own podcast? Anchor makes it really easy for anyone to get started. It's a one-stop shop for recording, hosting, and distributing podcasts. Best of all, it's 100% free. Sign up now at anchor.fm/new. That's anchor.fm/new to get started.